Hello everyone, it's Micah. Back to you with another reaction video. This is going to be our Wednesday series of videos where I will be reacting to the number one songs of the 1980s. So we're going to start from the beginning and I'll work our way through. These are all the number one songs that charted number one on Billboard Hot 100 in the decade of the 1980s. I picked the 1980s because it was the decade in which I started listening to music, and it's my musical home base. And I think it's good to keep in mind as I react to a lot of other stuff that's outside of my musical home base, whether it's really current stuff that I may not be as familiar with, or it's really old stuff that I'm not familiar with. That I keep it centered on some things that where I really am closer to my home turf, and to give you the viewers viewers, you as viewers are also viewing not just a reaction from me in a vacuum, but a reaction to me coming from where I come from. So I need to speak to the stuff that's in my wheelhouse, and the 1980s is one of my wheelhouses. So we're going to start at the beginning of the 80s. I'd be a little bit out of my element because I didn't start listening to pop music until around 1982. My parents, up to that point, they weren't big consumers of current popular music, and so and plus they were very religious, and so there was not a ban but a discouragement of listening to secular music. I found it on my own anyway, and they didn't like keep me from listening to it. But it wasn't until '82 and really '83 when I really kicked into high gear and started following popular music very closely, and it's become a hobby of mine ever since. Which ergo was why you're listening to me ramble on about it now. The very first number one of the 1980s was "Please Don't Go" by Casey and the Sunshine Band. Again, before my time, before I had really started listening to music. And so, yeah, I was surprised to find out that this was the same "Please Don't Go" that I'm familiar with, that came out in 1992 by, I think the group's name was, and I did cheat before and look up some of this stuff before watching the video. But I think the group's name was KWS. I believe they were a one-hit wonder, or very close to a one-hit wonder, and I did not know that was a cover. And I also, like, usually when I'm usually plugged in enough to know when a song comes out and I'm not aware and I wasn't around for the original, when they usually advertise that it's a cover, especially if it's a cover of a big hit. Like, I remember when Venus came out in 1986 and Bananarama covered it and it went number one. It was it was very much broadcast all over the place that this was a cover of an existing song. But when the song came out in '92, I don't recall anyone cluing me in that this was a cover, much less a cover of a number one hit. So this is a song. The song itself, I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with this original version of the song. I am familiar with Casey and the Sunshine Band mainly through "Play That Funky Music." No, that was Wild Cherry. Who was I can't remember. Okay, so now I'm confusing myself because that was not Casey and the Sunshine Band, but they had other funk disco hits, right? Yeah, yeah. So you can tell, like, disco, a little bit out of my element. Without the pressure of the camera on me, I would be able to tell you what Casey and the Sunshine Band's other hits were. But right now, I'm basically drawing a blank. But I am familiar with them. But this version of the song is new to me. So let's get into it and see what it sounds like. He's trying really hard to look serious. It's a good hook. Sounds a little bit like a guilt trip. I'm doing some of the swirly disco effects now. So apparently, it's a very tight lyrical structure with the lyrics repeated over and over. And the song is definitely building up. Simpler arrangement, layering instruments on as they go. Simple but effective way of building drama in a piece. And of course, he's getting more emotive as the song goes on as well. He's he's definitely doing the hyper dramatic Carlton. And then the disco effects again at the end. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's a really good hook in that song. It's a great melody. It's a really great melody. It's it's such a great melody that you don't really notice how simplistic the lyrics are. But the lyrics are simplistic, but they're also just simple and effective. It's I feel like they're trying to channel a Motown type energy where where they're trying to be sweet and sentimental and universal. And my understanding is that Casey and the Sunshine Band was a disco funk R&B style group, so I would expect them to follow that track of emulating a Motown approach to the songwriting and the song structure. Uh, but yeah, like the standout here is definitely the melody. It's very catchy. I I wasn't as much of a fan of the vocals. A couple of the notes it sounded like he didn't quite hit, and it also had this weird falsetto vibe, like when I try to sing falsetto, or someone who's not really well trained to do falsetto, where it sound like you're not getting all of the emotion or the range of notes that you want to get, because you're singing in the back, I'm not going to try to sing falsetto, but so you're singing in the back of your throat to try to get to that falsetto level. So it's like he's choking it off a little bit. Like, I'm not a vocal coach by any stretch of the imagination. This is just what I'm hearing, where it's not a full bodied falsetto, which is a bit of a contradiction. You don't Falsetto by definition means you're only using your head voice, but it's almost like he's kind of choking it off to force himself to hit those notes, and it doesn't come across as full as full and as effective as it could. And it could just be the quality of the vocal production on it that makes it sound a little off to me. But clearly, the standout here is the melody. That is a timeless melody that could be endlessly covered by other artists. So I definitely understand why they decided to cover it in 1992. And I think there's, from what I saw in my very brief research, there's been a couple of other covers that were released as well. I'd be interested to see a cover of it that supplemented it with additional verses, additional lyrics, because the song is almost one big hook. We tend to talk, lots of people tend to talk down about current music, that it's just a bunch of hooks thrown together. There's no real meat in a song anymore. It's all goes from one hook to the other. But here's a song from 1980 which to my ear sounds like just one hook after another, or maybe more to the point, the melody of the verses sounds very similar to, or almost identical to, the melody that's continued in the chorus. So it's this continuous sing-songy quality throughout the record. But I mean, I was already familiar with the melody, and that's clearly from the 1992 version, and that's clearly the standout thing here. And it's going to be interesting watching the sonic progression throughout the 80s, as we're going from this disco / post-disco sound, which was coming around in 1980, where this is right when the backlash was underway, and so the disco edge on these songs is going to get turned way down throughout 1980 and 1981. It's not going to be until the end of the decade that they feel comfortable turning it back up again and being really super dancey with it again. Probably with, I don't know if the Rick Astley song is going to be the first time we hear a number one. Well, no, I guess the Bananarama song that I just referenced, that is a pretty strong disco resurgent song, but it was also a remake of a song, so that would have been their excuse for reviving it, that it was a disco era sound. At any rate, that's me just thinking ahead about how the music is going to sound as we progress through the 80s. But yeah, that's a really solid, well-written hook, if nothing else. I enjoyed that. Video, a little cheesy, but to be expected from the early 80s. Great. So we'll be going to the second number one song, the one that knocked KC and the Sunshine Band off the charts. We'll be doing that next Wednesday, and that will be Escape, the Pina Colada song by Rupert Holmes. I'm looking forward to that. See you then.